I want to talk a little bit about some of the FUD or the critics. There's some skeptics out there. Some might call them haters of strategy and kind of the work that you do. Is there a critique or a misunderstanding of your work that kind of stands out?
I think when an airfoil moves faster than the speed of sound, like an airplane goes faster than the speed of sound, it creates a shock wave and a sonic boom. And it's very loud, it's very noisy, it's very turbulent. And what's going on when you're going faster than the speed of sound is you're going faster than the rate at which air can communicate to the air in front of it, right? The molecules in front of your fuselage are not able to communicate to the molecules 100 meters in front of you. So you end up with this sonic boom and massive turbulence and massive noise and chaos. What's going on with Bitcoin is evolving faster than a society can digest it. And so I think you could say this is all consistent. Bitcoin was misunderstood in the year 2011. It was misunderstood by me in the year 2013. It was misunderstood again in 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021. When we first got into the space in 2020, there were people that misunderstood it, and we had massive amount of criticism when our stock was $10 a share. When our stock went to $100 a share, it was massive amount of criticism again. When it crashed to $20 a share, there was still massive criticism. When we had $2 billion of Bitcoin, people were cackling, or $1 billion, saying, oh, you lost $1 billion on this. When we made 100 billion, everybody disappeared and slunk into the shadows. And then a new set of trolls, a new set of critics came out when our market cap went above 100 billion. It's a different set of cynics, a different set of critics, a different set of misconceptions. I think you're going to see the ebb and flow of that set of misconceptions and that anxiety. It'll continue when Bitcoin is 100,000. It'll continue when Bitcoin is 1 million. It'll continue when Bitcoin is 10 million. It'll continue when Bitcoin goes to 20 million. And there's always going to be a new narrative of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It'll be a different generation. You know, the people that used to laugh and say, oh, yeah, you lost $1 billion trading in Bitcoin, they're gone. They disappeared, right? There'll be a new generation of people that say, do you think it makes sense to buy Bitcoin at $1 million a coin? It's going to trade down to 500,000, right? And then there'll be a set of people that will say, you're buying it at 10 million a coin, it's going to trade to 6 million, you moron, you lost so much money. This is how societies deal with new ideas. If you study paradigm shifts, how long did it take to embrace electricity? How long did people thought John D. Rockefeller was crazy for 30 years until he was the richest man in the world. Mm-hmm. And then and at the point that he was the richest man in the world, people thought, well, that trade is done. And that was just when they invented the automobile and he got 10 times richer, right? And so the society doesn't really deal with paradigm shifts that well in near term, but after 30, 40, 50 years, you look back and you say, well, of course we should have embraced the fire, the electricity, the wheel, the crude oil, the nuclear, even nuclear power right now, for example. Nuclear power has only become cool or useful in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for 50 years, people thought nuclear power was an awful thing. And all of a sudden they woke up and they realized that I guess we need nuclear energy to power the AI data centers to make us super intelligent. And if we don't turn it on, we're going to be slow and stupid. So, if it took them 50 years, by the way, nuclear power is like unlimited, clean, free energy. And they had to fight for 60 years to get people to embrace the idea of unlimited clean energy. It doesn't surprise me that there'll be skeptics about digital energy. They won't get it. Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time. And what he meant was the old guard, they will never, ever accept a new idea. Whatever it is, they'll die. They will not accept a new idea. The only way you get people to accept a new idea is you wait for a new generation of decision makers, and the old guard retires and they age out, or you need a war. And people that don't believe in aircraft, but start believing in aircraft when the aircraft flies over their city and drops a bomb on their head. And people that don't believe in atomic energy start believing in atomic energy if someone sets off a nuclear warhead in the middle of a war. And so I think that disruptive, profound events like a near-death experience like during COVID, I think that introduces new ideas and new paradigms. That's how we got introduced into this space. It was the war on currency and the war on COVID in 2020 that caused us to open our eyes and embrace the new idea. I would say 95% of the decision makers in the finance world still don't really embrace or understand the idea of digital energy, digital capital, digital money. And I don't think it's a bad thing, because the only way you're going to make 10 to 100x your money is if you pick the right thing and everybody disagrees with you.
Yeah.
If everybody agrees with you and you do the right thing, well, everybody agreed you should buy Amazon in the year 2020 during the lockdowns because it was quite obvious that you needed Amazon during the lockdowns. It's the worst investment of the past 5 years because everybody agreed that it was a good investment, and there's a lesson in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if there's a tipping point where everyone starts to come around, kind of like what you're saying. Sounds like you've seen that too, where skeptics maybe started 5 years ago. Now they're kind of proving them wrong. And a lot of the kind of what you're speaking to is the old guard, the banking industry. What about skepticism within the Bitcoin community specifically? Does any of that surprise you or stand out in particular?
It's a vocal community. There are a lot of opinions. People say Bitcoin is money for enemies. There's been skepticism in the Bitcoin community since before Bitcoin, right? One could argue that Bitcoin was born out of skepticism, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's deep in the ethos and the culture, the idea to question everything, slay your heroes, don't trust, verify. No. Right. So the whole idea of Bitcoin is, don't trust anybody, don't trust any institution. And so if you start asking the question, how do you create an economic protocol where you don't want to trust any of 8 billion people and any of 400 million companies and any government? That's an interesting question. I would say that skepticism has its place. It is motivational. But at some point, it can become, what is the word?
Counterproductive, maybe?
Counterproductive idealism, right? And the truth of the matter is, you do need to trust the company to create the airplane you fly in. You do need to trust the company that creates the car you drive in. You do need to trust the dentist at some point because you can't. And you do need to trust the doctor because you can't take your own appendix out, or at least it's very rare, right? And so at some point, you do have to trust something. And I would say, the more evolved way to look at Bitcoin is not that you want to embrace it and never trust anything. The real inspiration and the promise of Bitcoin is once you've embraced it, you have the option to extend and withdraw your trust, from time to time. And if you choose to not trust the government, you can relocate your Bitcoin to a different country. And if you choose to trust a custodian, you can locate your Bitcoin with them. And when you decide to stop trusting them, you can relocate your Bitcoin to any of 100,000 other entities. Or if you go through a period of life when you choose not to trust anyone, you can self-custody. And when you decide you don't trust yourself, you can transfer your custody to another family member, right? And change. So the real power of Bitcoin is optionality. And the reason we have the optionality is because the entire movement was born out of distrust. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so there is a yin and the yang. There is a dialectic here. And you need a healthy degree of skepticism and distrust and cynicism. But once you've created the technology, you're not going to reach your full potential unless you work with other human beings, right? And so ultimately, when you decide that you're going to work with other human beings, either as a trusted custodian or a trusted hardware device manufacturer or a trusted hardware wallet, or you work with another corporation that's a trusted team of people, whether they, work on your teeth or work on your heart or manufacture the food or provide you with the aircraft, travel you need. At that point, you can reach your full potential, and you do it empowered, with property rights and with economic rights. And the reason that you will be able to trust them is because you have the option to withdraw your trust. All right. So I look at it as the great deterrent. If you think about gold and why gold failed, one reason gold failed is it's so incredibly difficult to custody. And so if you look at in the history of gold, in the 1920s, you had 4 great central bankers, and the central banker in Germany was Schacht, and the central banker in the U.S. was Ben Strong. And the world, was substantially on a gold standard, and the Germans had gold. And the French had gold, and the British had gold, the Americans had gold. But for the most part, the gold was either in London or in New York. The French gold was with the British or the Americans, or the German gold was with the Americans. So there's a famous story where Schacht traveled to New York City, met with the head of the Fed, Ben Strong, and Ben Strong wanted to show him the German gold, took him down into the basement of the New York Fed, and they couldn't find the gold. And of course, the message of the story is this: gold is so difficult to custody, countries couldn't figure out how to, like the entire country of Germany couldn't figure out how to custody their own gold, much less the 100,000 companies in Germany or the 60 million people in Germany. And so the reason gold failed was it was too slow and too difficult to custody, and therefore your property rights were always going to be impaired by a central actor. And, imagine the entire world running on gold-based credit on a gold standard when all the gold in the world was sitting in London and New York City, and most of it was in New York City, and we can say, oh yeah, that's a bearer asset, but not really, because 40 million companies couldn't bear it. 400 million people couldn't bear it, right? And so Bitcoin, it represents the bearer instrument, but it really is practical for an individual to take custody, and it's practical for a company to take custody. And of course, I guess what I counsel to people that are idealists is they don't trust banks and they don't trust companies. But the point that I would make is during the entire gold era, gold was so difficult to handle that no company could custody their gold, and no bank could. If we lived in a world where 40,000 banks were custodians of Bitcoin, you would have evolved from a world where there were like 8 or 6 custodians of Bitcoin custodians of gold in the entire world, right? And so I think that Bitcoin offers a promise of economic integrity, and I don't think we should rail against a bank embracing Bitcoin.
No.
The truth of the matter is, if every country on earth embraced Bitcoin and the countries became the custodians of Bitcoin, and the only thing we accomplished was to have 150 countries custody Bitcoin, that would be more decentralized than the gold standard for hundreds of years, right? It would be an order of magnitude more decentralized than we had under the gold standard. So what we're talking about is a world where if only banks and only governments custody Bitcoin, you would be 100x to 1,000x more decentralized. And if corporations in custody Bitcoin, you would be 10,000 times more decentralized. And of course, in a world where millions of individuals or tens or hundreds of millions of individuals self-custody, you're not like 1, 2, 3, 4 orders of magnitude more decentralized. You're like 6, 7, 8 more orders of magnitude more decentralized. So I tend to focus upon the fact that the worst case for the Senate is 1,000,000 times better than the best case we had 100 years ago, or even the best case we had ever.
Right.
In terms of decentralized monetary integrity.
Yeah.